All right, welcome everybody. This is a virtual open house that the district is holding. My name is Asia Philp. I'm the planner that is processing this rezoning application. And with me today is Lily Marie, providing some support. And just a quick rundown of how we're going to run the open house today. I'm going to go through a really quick presentation, provide an update on the project, and then after that we can transition to a discussion. And you guys are welcome to ask any questions or give us your feedback and comments. And you can do that through two ways. You can unmute yourself and with video or without your decision, engage. Otherwise, do feel free to type into the chat box any questions or comments that you have there. Everybody will be able to see those chats as well, and Lily will read them out for people that are just listening in on this as well. And with that, we'll get started. So as mentioned, this is the rezoning application for the 38779 and 38795 Britannia Avenue. And as a project update, Council has given this one reading that occurred on October 15th, 2025, so last fall. And at that meeting, Council requested further engagement with the neighborhood. And so on Thursday evening last week at Howe Sound Secondary, we had an in-person open house that was pretty well attended by the neighborhood. And this is our second virtual presentation and open house for those who couldn't make it out on Thursday night. We've made some minor changes since the council meeting. So the developer heard feedback from council and they increased the interior side setback. That's the property line that is shared with the neighbor to the south. They increased it about 1 meter, so they pulled it back to a 3-meter setback. And the developer made a commitment to have a taller garage height and also garage doors. And so this will allow vehicles that are over height to be able to functionally use their garage to park in. And third change is that the visitor parking, an extra visitor parking space was added to the site plan. So there's now 3 visitor parking spaces. So for next steps, staff are going to bring the rezoning application back to council for consideration of a second and third reading of the zoning amendment. We don't have a date set for this, but it would be March 4th, 2025 at the very earliest. And what we will do is we'll include summary of feedback received from the neighborhood and put that in a report to council. And any comments that we receive from folks in the community who have written in, either dropping their comments off in person or sending them to us by email, those comments will be consolidated and also added to the council agenda package, and council reads those comments before they go about their decision-making process. So quickly, not a huge amount of change. This is the site plan, the most current one. It shows the 3 visitor parking spaces. It shows the increased interior side setback, and it shows the park space in green that has been added along Garibaldi Avenue. And this park space is to provide both a community gathering space for folks in the neighborhood and also to save those 2 significant trees to the south that are also along Garibaldi Avenue. The townhouse unit layout is shown here. It's the beige units, and then the driveway, the shared driveway is also shown. The developers updated the form and character. So previously it was a bit more of a modern kind of West Coast design, similar to some of the newer townhouse developments that you may have seen popping up around town. And the applicants received feedback from both residents, council, and staff that perhaps they needed to revise it to be a better fit for the Dentville neighborhood. And so he's come back with the below image, which is more of a historical or more traditional type form with pitched roofs. and they're proposing to use kind of hardy shingle in some more kind of heritage colors. For neighborhood improvements, the applicant is proposing to do sidewalks along all of the property lines and then extend the sidewalk along Medill Street to the transit stops as well as the school bus stop that is along Buckley Avenue. And so in the image to the right, you can see in blue, those are the sidewalks that will be put into the neighborhood in conjunction with this development. And as well, the applicant is proposing to update the five-way intersection with a traffic button, kind of a roundabout style, and doing curb bulges and painted crosswalks to allow for increased pedestrian safety in that intersection. As part of a rezoning, the council has the ultimate discretion to yay or nay a development proposal, and part of the review is against the district's community amenity contribution policy. And so this slide shows our targets from the policy, which is $23 per square foot of new floor area. And the applicant is proposing to meet this target, which is a total of about 1.1 million. That would be a cash contribution. And this contribution goes into a district community amenity contribution reserve fund, which can then be utilized and put towards things like affordable housing, our rec center upgrades, library upgrades, and things that are kind of amenities beyond the scope of in the ground infrastructure like sewer, water, and storm lines. We also, as part of the CAC policy, we have targets around active transportation and parks. And the value of that is going to go into the five-way intersection build out and the sidewalk to Buckley Avenue. The ticket price of those infrastructure upgrades are significantly beyond the 72,000 policy target. So in summary, this developer is offering contributions that are above and beyond the district's policy. The last thing I wanted to touch on is we've worked with the developer to secure the protection of the two really large American hornbeam trees, which are located in the southwest corner of the property. These are going to be preserved and made into park space. What you're looking at here with the map, the red circles are the trees that are existing that are going to be preserved. And the outline is roughly the outline of the tree's root and drip line. So the full extent, and you can see actually a previous iteration of the applicant's site plan in which they were showing more units that would result in the removal of the two significant American hornbeam trees. And staff worked with the developer to encourage him to do less units and preserve the trees. So that's a positive outcome, and that the developer was willing to make that change. And this is currently where we've landed with the project. So there's a few ways that you can give us your feedback. You can email planning@squamish.ca. You can also drop off your written comments in person. And we'll also be taking comments until the rezoning application is again before council. And a reminder that that is to be determined, but it would be March 4th at the earliest if you're looking for a target date upon which to submit your comments by. So I'm going to stop the presentation. I'm happy to pull up any slides if people have questions specifically about what was shown, and we can open the floor to asking about any questions and any discussion that you guys would like to engage in. Again, you can pop your comments into the chat. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute you and we can have a good conversation about things. We have until 1:30 So thank you for your time for this. If you just wanted to tune in to get an update about where we're at with the project and would like to take kind of your thoughts and time and have an opportunity to collect things and get it into writing, then you're welcome to drop off the open house meeting at any time. There's no pressure to stay till the very end. And if there are no questions from the folks that are online, then we'll give you 1 or 2 minutes and then we'll wrap up the open house. If there's no questions or things that people would like to discuss. Otherwise, Lily and I will be sitting here and awkwardly waiting.
We can talk more about, you tell, a lot of people had questions on CACs, for example, like, can the CACs, if they're $1 million and if this development does go through, are the people of Denville able to sort of communicate how they would prefer their CACs to be spent, or is that any sort of input that could be allowed there?
So for sure, people can give us their feedback about what they would like that cash contribution to go towards. But the district collects these cash contributions across the entire district from various developments that are happening. And it goes into one collective fund. And then it's the district council who decides how that's to be allocated and how those funds are to be spent. So for example, recently in the Dentville neighborhood, there was the Spirit Creek townhouse, apartment development that was built in partnership with BC Housing and Sea to Sky Community Services. And the district chipped in some of their CAC funds to go to the construction and development of that project. So that's one example where, it kind of benefited a little bit of the Dentville neighborhood to increase the diversity and provide more housing opportunities in Dentville, but it also was like kind of a benefit towards the entire community for the provision of affordable housing.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question, Lily.
That's right. Okay, we have questions from Dave. Is there any concern about how close the interior units are separated?
I would invite Dave to, I'm just a little bit confused about what he's speaking to. Do you mean separation between the townhouse blocks from the other townhouse blocks, or separation, like fire separation between individual units?
Yes.
Between the townhouse blocks. Yeah, there's not concern at the staff level. There's a clearance, I think it's about 8 meters separation. So from a safety perspective, no concerns. From a livability perspective, those interior units, some of them will be close to their neighbors, but that's no different than some of the other developments that we've seen around town. For example, some of the interior townhouse development in Eaglewind are quite tight, and I think it's up to the individual, like people that are choosing to live in those places, whether they're comfortable with their proximity to their neighbors. And I guess that's all I'll say on that question.
Heather just asked, how many townhomes were there and how many parking spots are there for each? I did comment in there that there's 29 townhomes, but how many parking spaces does each townhome get?
Yeah, so confirmed, the proposal is for 29 units at this time, and the parking spots are 2 parking spots per unit for a total of 58 for the residential component. These are all proposed to be located within garages. And so the district parking requirement in the zoning bylaw is met by the use of the 2 parking spaces in the garage.
And then how many visitor parking spaces are there?
It was 2 and now it's been increased to 3. Yeah, the district requirement or the district standard would amount to 8 total spaces. It's 0.25 per townhouse unit in terms of calculating the number of visitor parking spaces. So this applicant is asking for a reduction in the spaces, which district staff were supportive of based on our desire to preserve a bit more park space. There's only so much room on the property, and as you can see from the site plan, things are squeezed in there quite tight already. So there's not a lot of opportunity to have any more visitor parking spaces without kind of eating into that park space that we've carved out.
Does anyone have any other questions so far, or any subjects that we could even touch on? If you don't know maybe how to ask it directly, we could expand on something that has been said in this presentation.
I can talk just very briefly, Lily, about kind of the trade-offs between what's being proposed with the townhouse development and what could be developed under the existing residential 1 zoning. Yeah, so the properties in Dentville across the board were rezoned to this new R1 residential 1 zone in June of last year. This was the mandate of the Bill 44, which is the provincial legislation, basically coming down from the NDP government saying that everybody kind of in more populated areas with single family neighborhoods needed to allow for some small scale multifamily to go into these areas. And so under the R1 zone, you can do up to 4 stratified units. So that could look kind of like 4 townhouses or row houses connected to each other. It could look like 4 small single family homes, kind of disconnected, not touching each other, and anything kind of in between. So single family, duplex, triplex, and then up to the fourplex. The zoning also allows to have 1 unstratified suite or coach house for a total of 5 units per property. And the district did a little bit of an exercise and looked at the 2 properties and their total area. And we calculated that this applicant, if they chose to do a subdivision application, could likely achieve 6 individual lots. And so the density and the number of units that could be achievable under the R1 is actually quite similar to what is being proposed in this townhouse proposal. So under the R1, the district doesn't have discretion since the zoning exists outright. And so that means that if the developer chose to go the R1 route, that he could just do the subdivision. He'd have to upgrade his frontages with the sidewalks, but he wouldn't have to do the intersection upgrades, and he wouldn't be required to do the sidewalk extension across Medill all the way to Buckley. There wouldn't be any requirement to meet our community amenity contribution policy. So that means that 1.1 million wouldn't be on the table. And the district also doesn't have any ability to preserve the significant trees that are located on the site. So there's no leverage from our part to save or preserve the existing trees on site or secure any additional park space for the community. So those are some of the trade-offs and differences between the current townhouse proposal that's before council and doing the R1 zone development route.
Okay. And I know that this is not your area, sorry to put you on the spot, Asia, but a lot of people did have questions regarding, there's always concerns when it comes to development and density, particularly in older neighborhoods when it comes to infrastructure. At what point does the infrastructure get upgraded, or to make sure that the infrastructure can support more people in these older neighborhoods? Can you speak to that? I know a few people had questions.
Yeah, that's Really good, broad question. So broadly speaking, I mean, the district kind of just, we do have aging infrastructure and a lack of kind of sidewalks and safe pedestrian areas across a lot of our older neighborhoods. And how the district is able to improve those for the neighborhood is through two different channels. One is through doing the projects on the district's own through taxation and doing capital projects. And the other is to get developers and people that are asking for increased density to provide that infrastructure for us. And so the district seizes every opportunity that we have to get that infrastructure and to leverage the new development that is coming online to kind of increase the safety and make improvements to the local neighborhood that is kind of receiving that increased density. And then in terms of capital projects, we have master plans that live under the engineering department and DCC projects, and all of these are just kind of gone through and prioritized by council and with recommendation from staff. Unfortunately, in a lot of the low density neighborhoods, it's a huge expense to put in the infrastructure and not a lot of people who live in those neighborhoods. And so I think to date, the tendency has been to see a lot of the projects, the capital improvement projects that the district have led, go to places where it kind of benefits the most residents of Squamish. So higher density neighborhoods.
I have a question for Dave. Said, would building a fourplex under R1 without a subdivision trigger this service agreement to upgrade the road frontage?
Yes, is the answer to that. So even under the existing zoning, the district would be requiring a servicing agreement to secure just the frontage upgrades. And Dave, if it's over the capacity through water or sewer, the existing services, then there might also be additional upgrades that the fourplex builder would be under to make sure that there's enough capacity to accept that development.
Okay. And Heather asks, why not extend the sidewalk down the entire street rather than just to the perimeter of the development, in brackets, with the exception of the one extension down to Buckley?
I'm just going to read the question too. Oh, yeah.
Excellent. We'll make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. So we look at what the development is proposed and what the development might be able to pay for. And essentially, this development is not large enough to cover extending the sidewalk down the entire street. And they are on the hook to do their perimeter because that's their frontage. So anywhere their property line touches the district road right of way, by bylaw, they have to do these improvements. The extension is not in the bylaw, and that's where it gets into the above and beyond as part of the rezoning amenity package. So that sidewalk to Buckley is part of this developer's amenity contribution that they don't have to do, but that they are offering to do.
Okay, she also asks, there is currently a shortage of street parking for residents as it is. How can we accommodate a 29-unit complex with only 3 visitor parking spots instead of the DOS standard of 8?
Yeah, so this is where we get into those trade-offs. And the assumption is that some of the overflow parking will be accommodated through the on-street for the visitors, the 5 extra visitors that can't park on the site. And they'll have to use the street parking, even though, as Heather points out, there is sometimes a shortage depending on the time of day. So this is part of the overall kind of complex situation within the district of running low on accommodating parking spaces for vehicles. And the focus of the district is to ensure that the parking meets our bylaws, but not to have an oversupply or to figure out where the excess parking is going to go.
Okay. She had a good question about how does the DOS plan to address short-term rentals, which are likely to pop up in these units?
Great question. I am also one of the planners who wrote the short-term rental regulations. And so what the District of Squamish, very quickly for those on the line, the short-term rental regulations allow people to STR their principal residence. So that's the home that they live in most of the time. And they can get a business license. And they also, within stratas, need to meet the strata regulations. So this many strata bylaws don't allow short-term rental regulations. And so these people would be unable to obtain a license, and then they would enter, if they did try to list, they would enter into they would be enforced upon by the District of Squamish's licensing and enforcement staff. So that's how that is addressed. If the strata regulations allow short-term rental, then if it's a person's principal residence, they can obtain a business license and proceed to do their short-term rental.
Not for the whole unit though, would that be a temporary use
No, it
permit, or
is
they
for
can do
the whole, it
unit?
is for the
Okay,
whole
they
unit.
can do the whole
Yeah,
unit.
or it can be a room in their townhouse.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it's running on the assumption that the strata bylaws
Oh,
allow this.
okay.
Yeah.
Is the District of Squamish currently enforcing those that are breaking the bylaw? I'm guessing regarding short-term rentals or parking? Short-term rentals?
Uh,
Short-term rentals, yeah.
Yeah, but the answer is both. Like the district's enforcing, I'm sure people in the Dentville neighborhood are aware because they have the no parking on the one side of the street, and I've seen enforcement on that street happening in real time. So parking and short-term rentals are both being actively enforced upon by the district's enforcement department.
Yes, yes, which I believe has increased recently. So maybe we haven't seen it a couple of years ago, but they're definitely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
We'll probably be seeing that more.
yeah.
Yeah. Heather did just make a note circling back to the parking. She just wanted to note that assuming there would be only 5 extra visitors for 29 units, just commenting on I guess that would be the street parking as well. But yeah, that's that balance I think that Asia was talking about, that moving forward as density increases, there is always going to be a bit of a struggle with tackling parking versus green space versus
Yes.
it's
always a trade-off. One question that came up when we had the in-person open house is about whether the district is considering shifting to resident only, like a parking permit system. And in discussion with our engineering department, who's leading kind of the parking portfolio, my understanding is that resident permit parking is not on the table at this point. It's apparently incredibly onerous to administer. So just trying to keep track, and then also the enforcement component that goes along with that administration of that program is like above and beyond what the district has capacity to do. So I believe the focus is kind of on downtown and paid parking considerations at this point, and nothing that's going to kind of directly affect kind of our existing residential neighborhoods.
Yeah. Is there anything on the design at the moment? We have the form and character there on screen, and the layout. Is that something that would ever be changed between, like, moving forward, based on comments? Is that something that can be sort of continued?
Yeah,
to alter?
definitely. So, the proposal from the developer in terms of like the site plan and the number of units and his amenity contribution, that's kind of not locked in, but that part has been kind of accepted at the staff level. And so that I don't see a lot of wiggle room to kind of modify, but the form and character and how the actual townhouse buildings look is an open kind of, we welcome people's feedback on that. And I think the developer is open to making changes. He's shown already that he's willing to kind of take pretty dramatic shifts in the look and design of his buildings. And so that's an area where we definitely invite feedback from the community on.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I think we still have two participants online, Judith and Heather. Is there any more questions that you have for us?
Oh, hello. Thank you
Hi,
for
Judith.
just giving this information. And of course, we who've lived here for a long time are sad to see that area developed, but we also understand that it's inevitable. So, and happy to see the changes that they have made. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Judith, for your feedback. And I think we're empathetic. It's a tricky one, given the location in the very middle, kind of the heart of Dentville. But it's also nice to have the recognition that, these two lots are not going to remain this beautiful kind of park space with these large trees that everybody's enjoyed through the many years. We're doing our best to try to retain some of the trees, and those hornbeams will hopefully go a long ways in actually kind of providing a visual buffer for a lot of the neighborhood. And so that's nice for the people on the Garibaldi side. Doesn't necessarily recognize the people on the Britannia side, but there are trade-offs, and we're doing what we can to try to mitigate the impact to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Another comment from Heather. We have thinking about the sidewalks again. It would be nice if the DOS would consider extending sidewalks to address the safe route to schools plan and the fact that there will be many new residents and families coming to the neighborhood. For 29 units, does the DOS have any metrics on how many new residents that would be? So we could probably put those two questions together. Maybe
Mhm.
are they 3-bedroom townhouses?
They are 3-bedroom townhouses, yeah.
Okay.
Did you do the?
We only did it on units capacity. It was just sort of,
Yeah.
we did, I think if anyone went to the open house on Thursday, the boards are online. There was just a bit of a broad look at how many units of housing was in the entire Dentville, and that does include lower end, Wilson, is it Wilson?
Yeah, the
yeah,
Wilson
Street.
Crescent Street.
But it just showed how many units are added on to the whole amount there, but it didn't actually put the data in population increase, which would be individuals.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but it's a really good point. This 29-unit townhouse development, if you can assume 2 to 3 people is the district's average per residential unit. So that's, maybe 60 to 70 new people living in the neighborhood. And many of them will be families that are walking to school. And so, Heather, I think it's a really strong point that we need to talk about the school, safe routes to school, and about making kind of those north-south streets that head towards Howesound Secondary and Squamish Elementary and École Les Aiglons to make it safer for the kids. The one thing that we did do with the Medill extension is recognize that there's actually quite a busy bus stop at that Buckley and Medill intersection. And so hopefully that will be of benefit to those handful of kids that are walking that route daily. And then on the 29 unit, I did. Yeah, so I think 60 to 70 folks,
3
new
times 3,
folks
90,
in the
yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we also address the speed limits and traffic calming in this neighborhood?
Yes,
Okay.
and we certainly can, and that's where we would also like to hear from the neighborhood and individual residents about what are the main kind of pinch points and the places where we see near misses and things like that, and flagging those for us in planning, but also in engineering, is really important to hear from the neighborhood. I think that engineering ran a good survey. I think it was, I can't remember when it was last year, but asking for people
It was
to
last year.
identify where the trouble
yeah, trouble
areas
where trouble streets where they
are. And of course, it's kind of the squeaky wheel that gets greased
Yeah.
sometimes. Like we've seen some really good improvements in the Highlands neighborhoods. And I think that Denville's overdue for some of those improvements. And so I encourage folks to write in and give us your thoughts on where they are. And yes, the four ways and Britannia and Medill, I I see that regularly too, because my little guy goes to the Shea's daycare in that neighborhood, and so I've seen that happen at Britannia and Medill, for sure. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, but is that a long-term, when we're looking at the traffic calming within Denville, that's obviously, it's an engineer's project. That's something that they are currently working on in general as far as.
I think it's like a constant
Mm.
project. So they did that big survey, and from that, I think they're prioritizing where they budget and spend on their capital projects every
Yeah.
year. But it's like they have to look at Squamish as a whole.
Mm.
And so that's why I'm saying like
Yeah.
the more feedback that a neighborhood can give and the louder that they
Brilliant,
are,
yeah.
sometimes some of that funding can get redirected.
Okay,
So
great. So it's something that we can.
I don't want to
encourage.
give a false hope, but
Yeah.
they look at it against kind of all of their master plans, and then they prioritize their projects based on their yearly budgets, and what they can accomplish in any given year. But we have seen improvements in other areas of Squamish, and Denville, I would say, probably hasn't seen much in terms of improvements for
Yeah,
their neighborhood.
Probably not. Will the 5-way be turned into a roundabout?
Yes, the intention is for the roundabout to be very tight and act as a traffic calming mechanism in the detailed design of the roundabout. And the example that I would provide is some of the areas in Vancouver when you get into some of the residential neighborhoods around Kitts, and you have to navigate around these really tight roundabouts where you have to slow right down. That's kind of the overall vision for that 5-way intersection, is to really calm the traffic and focus on pedestrians as the priority, and creating a safe ability for pedestrians to move down any of those 5 streets.
It's a good question. Just a question, actually. Sorry, Heather, I'll just read your next one out. But just on the roundabout that is being proposed at the moment. Now, this is only attached to this current rezoning. Just out of curiosity, should this rezoning not go ahead, is something like that roundabout, what happens to that idea? Does that sort of come later, or will it just sort of go away with?
It's unknown.
Hmm.
So if this development is not approved by council and they make their decision and it's that they don't want to do this,
Yeah.
then that roundabout does not happen in the near term.
Yeah.
And it just depends on where it falls on the priority list of capital projects.
Okay.
You know, it could be 5 years, it could be 25 years. Like it's so hard to say.
Okay. So Heather just wanted to note that for consideration, I think the DOS needs to match some of the funds with these developers to improve the neighborhoods by extending sidewalks, adding traffic calming, etc. It makes no sense to have halfway sidewalks.
Yeah, agreed. And it's feedback that we receive on a lot of projects, that there's kind of a sidewalk to nowhere or like
I
a
get that.
sidewalk that just ends and
Yeah.
doesn't go anywhere. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the district trying to leverage these new developments to get the most that reasonably can be got out of the redevelopment of a property. And sometimes the end result is that it is this piecemeal approach. And it's not ideal, but it's us trying to leverage the opportunity when it presents itself, and then knowing that over time, many years, that slowly the gaps in the teeth will get filled in.
Right. Every time.
But I agree, it's not ideal.
No. Okay.
Great, thank you for your message, and thanks for
Thanks so much,
attending,
Heather.
Heather.
Yeah. Great
All
comments.
right. And maybe just one last for the recording, that there's no date set for consideration of this application, but that it would be March 4th at the very earliest. And so we'll be taking your comments and feedback up until that point, potentially beyond. And you can email us planning@squamish.ca and do written comments that you drop off.
All right. Thanks for
And
attending.
thank you for attending. Have a great day. Will these comments be in the package also?
Oh.
No, Heather, these comments that you're typing in will not be in the package. And so I appreciate if you can take a few more minutes and maybe you can get them all written down so you can submit them to us directly. Great.
Perfect. Thank you.